Welcome to the Deep Dive.
So when you hear Birmingham, England, what comes to mind first? For a lot of people, I think it's that image, isn't it? The concrete jungle. Maybe a bit industrial, not exactly. Beautiful.
Now, that perception is definitely out there.
But what if I told you that this city, often sort of overlooked, actually holds this really fascinating history? We're talking groundbreaking architecture, a truly vibrant, incredibly diverse culture, and a population that's just constantly reinvented itself for centuries.
It really has.
So today, we're not just going to challenge those perceptions. We're taking a proper deep dive into how Birmingham's, its unique spirit has shaped everything, its buildings, its creative side, its whole identity.
That's it, exactly. What's so compelling about Birmingham, I think, is this relentless capacity for reinvention. There's this phrase someone used, an intangible sense of the other.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like it feels different, even though it's smack bang in the middle of Britain, the bullseye.
So our mission today really is to dig into those surprising facts, those enduring traits that define the city. Hopefully reveal a side you might not expect.
Okay, let's do it. Where do we start? How about the architecture?
Good place to start.
Birmingham's actually a surprisingly young major city. It really exploded from the 18th century onwards.
That rapid growth phase.
And because of that huge expansion and then, lots of redevelopment later, you don't find vast swaths of medieval stuff left.
Not like some other old cities, no?
But there are exceptions, some real gems, like the Old Crown, in Darrowtend. Dates right back to the late 15th century.
Ah, yes, with the timber framing. Beautiful example.
Exactly, classic timber frame look.
And that rapid growth you mentioned, it was fundamentally powered by the Industrial Revolution.
Right, of course.
The sheer amount of money generated led to some grand civic buildings for sure, but it also created this massive, urgent need for housing, for all the workers pouring in.
Oh.
And that's where you get the back-to-back houses. Rows and rows of them, literally built wall against wall.
The ones they've preserved.
Exactly, the Birmingham back-to-backs from around 1830 that give you such a powerful sense of that early industrial city, really cramped conditions.
Yeah, you can imagine. Okay, so moving forward, 17th century, we start seeing a shift away from timber.
Yes, a definite move towards brick and stone. Aston Hall is a great example, finished around 1635. Much more solid, imposing.
Right. And then the 18th century brings in those elegant Georgian and Regency styles.
Think St. Philip's Cathedral, completed 1715. That's got that feel.
Beautiful building.
And St. Paul's Square, which is amazing, really. It's the last complete Georgian square left in Birmingham. A real survivor, like you said.
Incredible, it's still there.
Then things get really interesting architecturally. Birmingham starts asserting itself more. Neoclassical style takes hold in the city center, especially around the 1820s.
Okay, like what?
Well, the big one is Birmingham Town Hall, the one that looks like a Roman temple.
Ah, yeah, very grand.
Designed by Hanson and Welch, finished 1834. And just a few years later, 1838, you get Philip Hardwick's Curzon Street Railway Station.
The old station.
That's the one. And what's fascinating is it's the world's oldest surviving piece of monumental railway architecture, and it directly copied London's Euston Arch.
Really? So it was a statement piece?
Absolutely. It was Birmingham saying, look at us, we're a major modern city now. Very deliberate.
Okay, so that sets the stage for the Victorian era. More industry, more money.
Exactly. And that money fueled massive building programs right across the city.
This is also when Gothic revival really takes off, right? And Birmingham was kind of central to that.
It absolutely was. You had key figures like Thomas Rickman, who basically codified Gothic styles, and the very famous A.W.N. Pugin working here.
Pugin, St. Chad's Cathedral.
Precisely. Completed in 1841. And think about the significance. First new cathedral in England since St. Paul's in London.
Wow.
And the first Roman Catholic cathedral built since the Reformation. Huge deal.
That really is significant.
Yeah. And even though his bishop's house nearby was demolished, it's seen as planting the seed for the whole spirit of the arts and crafts movement later on, a sort of austere beginning.
Okay, so after Pugin, we get into High Victorian. Lots of building.
Loads of building. Firms like Martin and Chamberlain were incredibly prolific.
And this is where the red brick comes in.
Yes. The pioneering use of red brick and terracotta. It's a key Birmingham look for that period.
Why was that? Just style?
Partly, but it was also practical. Birmingham didn't have good local building stone, unlike, say, Bath or Edinburgh.
Right.
And brick and terracotta stood up much better to the heavily polluted air, all that industrial soot and smoke.
Clever adaptation, then.
Very. The Victoria Law Courts from 1891 are just a stunning example of what they could do with those materials. Really ornate.
Okay, and that leads us nicely into the arts and crafts movement. You mentioned it earlier.
Yes, what many call a golden age for Birmingham architecture. It properly dominated architectural thinking and design here.
What was the philosophy behind it?
It was sort of a reaction against fussy Victorian styles and mass production. It emphasized understated design, traditional forms, honest construction, craftsmanship.
Back to basics, almost.
In a way, yeah. Less flashy, more about quality and materials. Think William Lefebvre's building on Colmore Row, 122, 124, completed 1900. It's actually seen as having European importance.
Really? Why is that?
Because it was such a clear break from just copying historical styles. Very influential.
Okay.
And you absolutely have to mention Bourneville, the model village George Cadbury built for his workers.
Ah, the chocolate factory village.
Exactly. Largely designed by William Alexander Harvey in that arts and crafts style. It wasn't just about nice houses, it was about community planning, green spaces, hugely influential on urban planning globally.
Wow. So the buildings themselves tell this incredible story of growth, adaptation, innovation.
They really do.
But what about the people inside those buildings? What about the culture that grew up in this environment? The urbanist Jane Jacobs had this great description. She called Birmingham a great confused laboratory of ideas.
I love that phrase.
Me too. And she said it grew through constant diversification. That feels important, especially for a city with that concrete jungle stereotype.
It absolutely nails it, that laboratory of ideas feeling. Its roots go way back.
How so?
Well, by the early 1600s, Birmingham was already known as a place for people who didn't quite fit the mold elsewhere. Religious nonconformists, scientific freethinkers, industrial entrepreneurs, political dissenters.
So a bit of a magnet for rebels.
You could say that. It earned the nickname City of the Thousand Trades because it wasn't dominated by one big industry, but loads of small workshops and businesses.
Right, fragmented.
Exactly. This kind of fragmented web of collaboration fostered adaptability, innovation, and maybe a bit of a suspicion of grandeur or pretension. It was about getting things done, accommodating difference. It was baked in early on.
And you see that spirit in the music scene too, right? It's surprisingly rich.
Oh, absolutely. There's a strong classical tradition. The Birmingham Triennial Music Festival ran for over a century, commissioning major works.
Elgar wrote for the city.
He did.
Yeah.
And today you've got the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, internationally renowned, playing in Symphony Hall, which has amazing acoustics apparently.
Okay, classical. But then there's the other side.
The really surprising side for some people, in the 1960s, Birmingham was a major popular music hub. Genuinely comparable to Liverpool in terms of influence.
Right, and this is where
heavy metal was born, Undisputed Birthplace, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest. They came out of this environment.
Wow, even Led Zeppelin members.
Half of them, yeah. Robert Plant and John Bonham were from nearby. So metal is Birmingham's gift to the world, you could say.